Arthur Schopenhauer did not veil his contempt when he wrote about women. He didn't sprinkle his words with courtesy or soften his tone with politeness. He launched a direct assault that still unsettles readers 2 centuries later. To modern ears, it can sound like unfiltered misogyny. Yet if you've ever been ghosted for someone with more money, if you've ever seen her cry in your arms one evening only to laugh with another man the next, if you've ever wondered why her words of love didn't align with her actions, then a part of you already senses what Schopenhauer was describing. He wasn't inventing cruelty. He was naming patterns that men have suffered in silence for centuries. Schopenhauer's philosophy began with his bleak view of existence. To him, life itself was a trap. Beneath all appearances lay what he called the will to life, a blind, relentless force driving reproduction and survival. We imagine we act freely, but in truth we are puppets, pulled by strings of desire we neither chose nor control. And in this scheme, women were not partners in romance, but the agents of nature's plan. Female charm, he wrote, was not a spiritual quality but an evolutionary mirage, a lure designed to bind men to the cycle of lust. Fatherhood and emotional captivity, only a man clouded by sexual impulse. He once wrote, could call the female sex fair. For Schopenhauer, beauty was not a gift, it was bait. Men who have felt abandoned or replaced recognize what he meant. A man imagines love as permanence, a vow, something sacred. But from nature's perspective, permanence is irrelevant. Survival is everything. While he dreams of a lifelong bond, she dreams of security. If another man offers more stability or status, instinct whispers to her to move on. History provides countless echoes. Josephine, once the love of Napoleon's life, cooled as his empire waned. Cleopatra, whose allure shifted alliances between Caesar, Mark Antony, and beyond. Schopenhauer believed this wasn't treachery, but design, evolution optimizing her chances. A man might call it betrayal. Nature calls it selection. This is why so many men end up blindsided. You think her tears are proof of depth, her words proof of devotion. But Schopenhauer insisted they are tools in a game older than civilization itself. To him, women do not conquer with force or reason. They conquer with something far more subtle and far more dangerous. While a man sharpens his sword, she sharpens her glance. While he builds arguments, she builds moods. And if you've ever found yourself apologizing when you weren't wrong, or working harder to win back affection that slipped away without explanation, you've already felt the edge of this weapon. The most disturbing part is that Schopenhauer was writing in the 19th century, long before dating apps, Instagram, or divorce courts. He saw patterns of manipulation and emotional leverage before modern psychology had the vocabulary to describe them. He knew that what men perceive as affection can be, in reality, a negotiation, and he dared to write it down, risking condemnation in his own time. His critics called him bitter. Yet when you compare his warnings to the quiet frustrations of men today, the ones who gave loyalty only to be discarded, you begin to wonder if he wasn't bitter at all, but brutally clear-eyed. And here lies the first wound. Schopenhauer argued that men ruin themselves because they confuse instinct with love. They believe devotion will be rewarded with devotion, but nature doesn't play by that rule. What looks like affection is often advantage, and what feels like permanence is often temporary. He wasn't saying this to strip life of romance, but to shake men awake. To him, ignorance of female nature was not innocence. It was slavery. And if a man remained enslaved, his suffering was inevitable. Yet Schopenhauer did not stop with beauty or betrayal. He claimed that women possessed an even deeper weapon, one that could bend even the strongest men without a single act of violence. And once you understand this weapon, you'll realize why so many men give everything, only to lose themselves completely. Schopenhauer believed beauty was not a blessing, but a mask, a disguise created by nature to keep men blind. Behind the soft skin, the smile, the glow of youth, he saw a calculated illusion. Beauty, he argued, is not proof of virtue. nor evidence of character. It is bait, an advertisement written by biology to draw men into the duties of fatherhood and the burdens of provision. To him, female attraction was less about love and more about survival. And modern science, though it uses different language, has confirmed much of what he suspected. Evolutionary psychologists today speak of hypergamy, the instinct in women to select the highest value man available. David Buss, a leading researcher, has shown through decades of studies that women consistently rank a man's ambition, status, and access to resources higher than men rank these traits in women. Even more unsettling, women's preferences shift with their biology. During fertile phases, attraction spikes toward dominance, strength, and confidence, signals of genetic fitness. When the cycle passes, the interest wanes. What Schopenhauer described as the short bloom of female affection was not mere bitterness. It was a glimpse into a biological pattern, one men still suffer without understanding. Consider the modern dating landscape. Apps like Tinder or Bumble expose endless options. A man may feel a connection, share late-night conversations, even meet families. Yet with a swipe, she can scan for someone taller, richer, more established. It isn't always conscious betrayal, it's instinct. Her psychology, shaped by millennia of survival in harsh environments, is wired to seek advantage. Social media amplifies this. The constant flood of validation, likes, and attention creates a marketplace where loyalty seems irrational. To Schopenhauer, this would not have been a surprise. He already saw that permanence was a male fantasy, not a female instinct. History confirms it in its most intimate dramas. Cleopatra, often celebrated as a queen of beauty, was also a master strategist. Her liaisons with Caesar and later Antony were not random passions, but carefully chosen alliances. Survival moves cloaked as romance. Helen of Troy, remembered as the face that launched 1,000 ships, was less an icon of love than a symbol of how female allure could redirect the course of empires. These were not accidents of history. They were demonstrations of nature's machinery. Nietzsche, who built upon Schopenhauer's philosophy, once observed that everything about woman has one solution. It is called pregnancy. His words were not dismissals of women as people, but acknowledgments of the biological imperative behind their choices. Freud, too, would later argue that much of our behavior is not governed by reason but by unconscious drives, many of them sexual in origin. What men mistake for affection or devotion is often a mask worn by instinct. The tragedy, as Freud might say, is not that we are deceived, but that we want to be deceived. And here lies the sting. Men build futures, weave dreams of permanence, carve legacies into stone. They imagine love as an eternal bond. But to a woman shaped by survival, permanence is not the priority. Advantage is, if another path offers more. Instinct whispers her forward. It does not make her evil. It makes her optimized. And when men refuse to see this, they give everything: time, loyalty, wealth, only to wake up abandoned, asking themselves what went wrong. What went wrong was not their devotion, but their blindness to the machinery behind the mask. Yet Schopenhauer warned that beauty and survival instinct were only the surface. Beneath them lay something even sharper, a weapon invisible, harder to resist, and far more devastating. It was not her appearance that enslaved men, but the way she wielded their emotions against them. And once this weapon is revealed, it explains why even kings and conquerors have knelt in silence, undone not by armies, but by a single glance. Schopenhauer wrote that women do not subdue men through logic, nor by strength, but through emotion. What makes this so dangerous is that it works invisibly. A sword can be seen, an argument can be refuted, but emotions creep beneath awareness. They bend decisions, tilt priorities, and before a man realizes it, his entire life is being shaped not by his own will, but by his need to appease hers. This, Schopenhauer warned, was the real theater of power, not brute force, but subtle domination. History is full of examples. Consider Catherine de Medici, who maneuvered French politics not by command, but by weaving webs of guilt, loyalty, and seduction. Or Madame de Pompadour, mistress to Louis XV, who held sway over France for nearly 2 decades, not through decrees or laws, but through emotional mastery. These women didn't conquer with armies. They conquered with moods, silence, tears, and charm. Schopenhauer would say they were simply practicing what nature had perfected: emotional leverage as survival strategy. Modern psychology gives us new words for the same phenomenon. Robert Greene, in The 48 Laws of Power, warns of emotional manipulators who disarm through vulnerability and charm, who dominate not by confrontation, but by guilt. Sam Vaknin, writing about narcissism, describes tactics like cold withdrawal, silent treatment, or sudden shifts of affection. Not random quirks, but calculated patterns that destabilize the target. Men who have lived through this know the sensation well. You argue with reason. She responds with tears. You make demands. She withdraws. You insist on fairness. She accuses you of cruelty. And before long, you are no longer fighting for truth. You are fighting for peace. You are negotiating with emotion, and you always lose. Think of the ordinary scenarios. A man comes home exhausted, hoping for rest. She senses his fatigue and asks why he seems distant. He explains. She grows upset. Soon he's apologizing, not for what he did, but for how she felt. Another man confronts his partner about flirting too openly. Instead of addressing the concern, she bursts into tears, accusing him of jealousy, of being controlling. He softens, comforts her, and the original issue evaporates. In both cases, he thought he was leading a conversation. In reality, he was being led by emotion, conditioned to yield. Culture reinforces this trap. Men are told to be patient, be sensitive, understand her feelings. These are noble in themselves. But Schopenhauer would argue they create a blind spot. For if no one warns a man that emotions can be used strategically, then his empathy becomes his leash. He learns to fear her silence more than his own unhappiness, to dread her tears more than his own dignity. He begins to shape his behavior, not around what is right, but around what avoids conflict. Slowly, his spine bends, his will weakens, and devotion turns into obedience. This is why Schopenhauer wrote with such ferocity. He saw men willingly surrender their power, intoxicated by affection, blinded by beauty, trapped by emotion. He wasn't trying to make men hate women. He was trying to reveal how easily they become prey when they mistake emotion for truth. And his prophecy has unfolded in modern times with even greater force. Today's man, raised on ideals of unconditional love and endless compromise, finds himself lost when she leaves without warning. Divorce courts overflow with men who gave everything only to discover affection was temporary. Dating markets reward charm and confidence, not sacrifice. A generation of men has been taught to yield, to kneel, to apologize endlessly in the hope that loyalty will be rewarded. But Schopenhauer's point was chilling. It will not. The modern man's tragedy, then, is not that women deceive him, but that he deceives himself. He clings to illusions of permanence while living in a world of shifting loyalty. And Schopenhauer insisted that the only way out is not bitterness, not rage, but something far harder: detachment. He believed the wise man learns to see through the mask without hating it, to feel without being enslaved, to give without surrendering. But how does a man reach that state? How can he love deeply without becoming a servant, or detach without becoming cold? Schopenhauer had an answer that echoes through Stoicism and modern philosophy alike. Schopenhauer's remedy was as brutal as his diagnosis. If life was governed by blind desire, and if women were nature's instruments to bind men to that desire, then the only escape was to step outside the game. The wise man places his happiness not in the gratification of desire, but in its denial. In other words, don't chase the mirage. Don't build your existence around a beauty that fades or an affection that shifts. Learn to live above the pull. This wasn't hatred. It was survival. The message finds echoes across time. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private meditations, reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To a man, the outside event most likely to shake his center is the fluctuation of a woman's affection. One day she's radiant with warmth, the next distant, cold, withdrawn. If you measure yourself by those moods, your identity becomes unstable. But if you learn to hold your frame regardless of her storm, then you are free. Nietzsche, though critical of Schopenhauer, extended the idea. Life is suffering, yes, but the higher man transforms suffering into strength. The man who refuses to be destroyed by betrayal grows beyond it. He is not bitter, but ungovernable. Detachment, then, is not indifference. It is clarity. It is the ability to see her charm and recognize its strategy, to enjoy her affection without mistaking it for permanence, to hear her tears without abandoning your reason. The sovereign man is not loveless. He loves without losing himself. He gives without collapsing into servitude. He can walk away, not because he is cold, but because he values his dignity more than temporary comfort. This is why the Stoics were unshaken. They didn't suppress emotion. They mastered it. They refused to let another's mood define their worth. And for the modern man, trained to beg for validation, this is the revolution he needs. Consider the contrast. The self-sacrificing man believes that the more he gives, the more she'll stay. He pours out wealth, patience, forgiveness, only to find her interest shrinking. He kneels, apologizes, reshapes himself endlessly, and still she leaves. His tragedy is that he thought love was a transaction, when in fact it was instinct playing its role. The sovereign man, by contrast, gives from abundance but expects nothing in return. He can be generous, but not dependent. He can be patient, but not weak. His power is that he does not fear her absence. And because he does not fear, he cannot be manipulated. This is not theory. It has shaped history. Marcus Antonius fell because he surrendered to Cleopatra's sway. Napoleon's empire cracked when he lost himself in Josephine's indifference. Yet men who maintained sovereignty, Marcus Aurelius in his restraint, Epictetus in his freedom as a slave turned philosopher, show us another path. The lesson is clear. Empires may fall to swords, but men fall to illusions. And the man who resists illusion stands like stone in a flood. For Schopenhauer, detachment was not cruelty, it was armor. Modern psychology confirms that boundaries are essential, that a man who refuses to be ruled by guilt or manipulation preserves his mental health and commands respect. This is why today's strongest men are not those who conquer nations, but those who conquer themselves. They walk away when respect dies. They do not beg to be loved. They do not apologize for having standards. They do not mistake suffering for romance. They love, but with eyes open. And when love fades, they remain whole. If you understand this, you realize that sovereignty is not isolation. It is freedom. It is the courage to be alone until you find someone worthy to walk beside you. It is the clarity to love without illusion, to serve without slavery, to give without losing your core. And in this clarity, bitterness dissolves. You no longer need to hate women, nor resent their nature. You simply stop expecting them to save you. You stop kneeling at altars built on sand, and you begin to live as Schopenhauer hoped men would live, seeing reality, yet no longer fearing it. So don't grow angry. Grow aware. Don't grow cold. Grow clear. Because the man who sees the machinery behind the mask is no longer its prisoner. He is sovereign. He is free. And in a world that trains men to kneel, the one who stands is the one who becomes untouchable.